I was standing in a crowded hospital hallway when my phone rang. The caller ID froze me in place. Dad. For 20 years, we barely spoke. 20 years earlier, he had pointed his finger at me and said the words that shaped my entire life. You'll never amount to anything, Ethan. I was 18 then. Now I was 38. And after 2 decades of silence, he was calling. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Then I answered. His voice sounded weaker than I remembered. Ethan. I need a favor. My stomach tightened. A favor? After 20 years? After every birthday he ignored? After every promotion he never congratulated me for? After every success he pretended not to see? I stared through the hospital window as rain ran down the glass. What kind of favor? I asked. There was a long silence. Then he said something that made my heart stop. I need you to trust me. Trust him. The man who never believed in me. The man who told everyone in town that I'd fail. The man who made sure I knew I was his biggest disappointment. I laughed bitterly. You called the wrong person. Then I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, my younger sister Claire showed up at my office. She looked exhausted. Dad's been trying to reach you. I kept typing. Not interested. Ethan. No. She sighed. He isn't doing well. I finally looked up. What does that have to do with me? Her eyes filled with tears. Please just hear him out. For a moment, guilt poked through my anger. Then I remembered being 18. Standing in our kitchen. Holding an acceptance letter to a state university. Proud. Excited. Hopeful. Dad barely glanced at it. You think college will save you? I remember the laughter in his voice. You'll never amount to anything. That sentence followed me for years. Every failed job interview. Every rejection. Every setback. His voice lived inside my head. So when Claire begged me to call him back, I refused. A week later strange things started happening. An envelope arrived at my house. No return address. Inside was an old photograph. Me at age 10. Dad standing beside me. Both of us smiling. On the back was written. Remember this day. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. I threw it into a drawer. Then another envelope arrived. This one contained a receipt. An old receipt from 21 years ago. The date caught my attention. It was from the same week Dad told me I'd never amount to anything. I stared at it. A payment receipt. Thousands of dollars. Made in Dad's name. I couldn't understand what it meant. Then another envelope came. And another. Each contained random documents. Receipts. Photos. Notes. Pieces of a puzzle. None of it made sense. Claire swore she wasn't sending them. My mother had passed away years earlier. Dad denied everything. Yet the envelopes kept arriving. The more documents I received, the more suspicious I became. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Then one evening I saw Dad. For the first time in nearly 2 years. I wasn't looking for him. I simply spotted him while driving home. He was sitting inside a small diner. Across from a man I'd never seen before. The two of them looked serious. Almost nervous. I parked across the street. Watched through the window. Dad slid a folder across the table. The stranger opened it. Looked inside. Then shook his head. Dad looked devastated. A few minutes later they stood and left separately. My pulse pounded. What was going on? Why all the secrecy? Why the envelopes? Why the meetings? And why had he suddenly reappeared after 20 years? That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time, I started wondering if Dad's request had something to do with money. Maybe debt. Maybe inheritance. Maybe something worse. The next morning another envelope arrived. Inside was a note. Just 6 words. The truth is not what you think. No signature. No explanation. Nothing. I crumpled the paper in frustration. Because by then I thought I knew exactly what was happening. Dad needed something. Money. Help. A bailout. And he was manipulating me into giving it to him. I had spent 20 years proving him wrong. Building my own company. Creating my own success. Now that he needed something, he suddenly wanted a relationship. The thought made me furious. But I had no idea that every clue was pointing towards something completely different. And within weeks, I would discover a truth that would make me question everything I believed about my father. Including the day he told me I'd never amount to anything. Ethan believes his father is manipulating him for money, but the mysterious envelopes and secret meetings are hiding a truth far more painful than betrayal. The next envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. By then, I had stopped throwing them away. I hated admitting it, but they were getting under my skin. Every document felt connected. Every photograph. Every receipt. Every note. It was like someone wanted me to see something, but not all at once. This envelope contained a hotel receipt. 20 years old. The date immediately caught my attention. It was from the exact week Dad told me I would never amount to anything. My chest tightened. Why did everything lead back to that day? I turned the receipt over. Nothing. No explanation. Just another clue. That evening I spread all the documents across my dining room table. Photos. Receipts. Notes. Old records. For nearly 3 hours, I tried to make sense of them. Then I noticed something strange. Every document pointed to the same period of time. The 6 months before I left home. The 6 months before Dad crushed my confidence with a single sentence. The 6 months that changed our family forever. I stared at the papers. Something happened back then. Something nobody ever told me. And suddenly I wanted answers. The next morning I called Claire. Meet me. 30 minutes later we were sitting inside a coffee shop. I spread the documents across the table. Claire's face went pale. Where did you get these? So you know something. She looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. Claire. Her eyes filled with tears. Please don't ask me. Anger exploded inside me. For 20 years I've been treated like an outsider. Ethan. Now mysterious envelopes are showing up at my house. Dad is having secret meetings. Everybody knows something except me. People around us began staring. I lowered my voice. What are you hiding? Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. Finally she whispered. Dad told me never to tell you. My stomach dropped. Tell me what? She shook her head. No. I stood up. If nobody wants to tell me the truth, I'll find it myself. Then I walked away. That night I couldn't stop thinking. I barely slept. The next morning I made a decision. I was going to follow Dad. I felt ridiculous doing it. Like some private investigator in a bad movie. But I needed answers. 3 days later I got them. Or at least I thought I did. Dad left his house around noon. I followed from a distance. He drove across town. Then farther. Eventually he pulled into the parking lot of a private medical center. I watched him enter the building. 10 minutes later another man arrived. The same stranger from the diner. They disappeared inside together. I waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. Nearly 3. When they finally emerged, Dad looked exhausted. The stranger handed him a thick folder. Dad hugged him. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Dad was crying. The stranger was crying too. My mind immediately jumped to one conclusion. Money. Debt. Legal trouble. Something serious. Something he needed my help to fix. I followed him again the next week. And the week after that. Each time there were more meetings. More paperwork. More secrecy. Then came the final clue. The clue that convinced me he was guilty. A lawyer called me. A lawyer. Out of nowhere. I'd like to discuss your father. Every muscle in my body tensed. What about him? I'm afraid I can't discuss details over the phone. My heart pounded. The lawyer sounded uncomfortable. Almost nervous. When can we meet? That was it. I was done. Done with secrets. Done with games. Done being manipulated. That evening I drove straight to Dad's house. For the first time in years. Rain hammered the windshield. Thunder rolled overhead. My hands shook on the steering wheel. By the time I reached his driveway, I was furious. I marched to the front door. And kicked it open before anyone could answer. Dad stood in the living room. Startled. Claire was there too. Both of them froze. Enough. My voice echoed through the house. Dad slowly set down his coffee cup. Ethan. No. 20 years of anger erupted from my chest. No more lies. Claire started crying immediately. I didn't care. I pointed at Dad. You said I'd never amount to anything. Silence. You disappeared from my life. Silence. Now suddenly there are secret meetings, lawyers, documents, mysterious envelopes, and everybody expects me to trust you? Dad looked exhausted. Older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. But I wasn't finished. You need money? Nothing. You have debts? Nothing. You want something from me? His eyes filled with tears. Still nothing. That made me angrier. I slammed the stack of envelopes onto the table. Talk. The room went silent. Dad stared at the documents. For several seconds he didn't move. Then he whispered. You found them. Something about his voice made my anger hesitate. Just slightly. Then he sat down. Slowly. Like a man carrying a weight too heavy to lift anymore. Claire covered her face. She was sobbing openly now. My stomach twisted. What was happening? Dad looked at me. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't look angry. He looked broken. Ethan, he said softly. I never wanted you to learn this way. My pulse pounded. Learn what? He opened the folder lying beside him. The same type of folder I'd seen at the diner. The medical center. The lawyer's office. Everywhere. His hands trembled. Then he slid a single document across the table. I looked down. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my eyes found my name. My full name. And beneath it. A date. A diagnosis. 20 years old. My breath caught. The room spun. Nothing made sense. Absolutely nothing. I looked up. Dad. His eyes filled with tears. The strongest man I had ever known looked completely shattered. And then he told me a truth so devastating. That every clue, every secret meeting, every envelope, every lie, and even the cruelest words he ever said to me, suddenly meant something entirely different. Ethan finally discovers that his father's betrayal may never have been betrayal at all, and the document on the table is about to reveal a heartbreaking sacrifice that has been hidden for 20 years. I stared at the document. My hands were shaking. The room felt smaller. The words blurred together as my mind struggled to process what I was reading. Then I saw it. A medical diagnosis. Dated 20 years ago. My name at the top. And underneath it, a phrase that changed everything. Severe degenerative eye disease. I looked up at Dad. What is this? My voice barely worked. Claire was crying so hard she couldn't even look at me. Dad swallowed. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Then he finally did. 20 years ago, doctors told us there was a very high chance you'd lose your vision. The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop. What? Dad nodded slowly. We got the diagnosis 3 months before graduation. I stared at him. No. It was early testing, he said. They weren't completely certain. But the specialists believed there was a strong possibility. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I had never heard this before. Not once. Not from my mother. Not from Claire. Not from anyone. Dad opened another folder. Inside were dozens of documents. Medical reports. Specialist evaluations. Treatment recommendations. Every single one carried my name. Every single one was real. I looked at the dates. 20 years. 20 years these papers had existed. 20 years I had no idea. Why? I whispered. Dad looked away. Because he couldn't meet my eyes. And suddenly I understood. He wasn't hiding from me. He was hiding from guilt. Then he spoke. The doctors said you might never be able to do the things you dreamed about. I remembered the college acceptance letter. I remembered my excitement. My plans. My future. Dad continued. I was terrified. His voice cracked. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I couldn't accept it. For the first time in my life, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not anger. Not disappointment. Fear. The fear of a father who thought he might lose his son's future. I sat down slowly. My legs felt weak. Then Dad said something I will never forget. I thought if you believed the doctors, you'd stop fighting. The room became completely silent. So I made the worst decision of my life. Tears filled his eyes. I tried to make you angry. I stared at him. What? I wanted you to prove me wrong. I couldn't breathe. Dad's voice trembled. I thought if you hated me enough, you'd never quit. My heart pounded. No. It's true. The tears finally rolled down his face. The day I told you you'd never amount to anything. I had just come home from another doctor's appointment. I remembered that day perfectly. The kitchen. The acceptance letter. The humiliation. The anger. The pain. The sentence that haunted me for 20 years. You'll never amount to anything. I had heard those words thousands of times in my head. But now they sounded different. Horribly different. Dad buried his face in his hands. I thought I was helping. The pain in his voice broke something inside me. I thought if you spent your life proving me wrong, you'd keep moving forward no matter what happened. The room was silent except for Claire's sobs. Then she finally spoke. Mom begged him not to do it. I turned toward her. She nodded. He wanted to tell you the truth hundreds of times. Dad closed his eyes. I couldn't. Why? His answer shattered me. Because every year you succeeded. I stared at him. He continued. You graduated. A tear rolled down his cheek. You built a business. Another tear. You bought a house. Another. You became stronger than I ever imagined. His voice cracked completely. And every year I became more ashamed. I felt sick. For 20 years I believed my father hated me. For 20 years I thought I was the disappointment. For 20 years I believed his words came from cruelty. But now every clue suddenly made sense. The envelopes. The receipts. The photographs. The mysterious notes. The meetings. The lawyer. Everything. I looked at the old receipt. The one that confused me. Dad explained quietly. I spent almost everything we had on specialists. I looked at another receipt. Private testing. Second opinions. Experimental consultations. Another. Travel expenses. Another. Treatment programs. Thousands. Then tens of thousands. Money I never knew existed. Money spent trying to save my future. The photographs suddenly made sense too. The one that said, "Remember this day." It had been taken before the diagnosis. Before fear entered our family. Before everything changed. Then I remembered the diner. The stranger. The medical center. The lawyer. What about the meetings? Dad looked down. For a moment he seemed embarrassed. Then he smiled sadly. I was arranging a scholarship. A scholarship? He nodded. For students facing the same condition doctors thought you had. I couldn't speak. He continued. The man from the diner runs the foundation. The room blurred through my tears. You were doing that? Dad nodded. I wanted to help other families. I covered my face. The guilt hit me like a truck. Every accusation. Every angry thought. Every year of resentment. Every assumption. I had been wrong. Not completely. His words had hurt me. Deeply. But the reason behind them wasn't hatred. It was fear. Misguided. Painful. Terrible fear. For the first time in 20 years, I walked across the room and sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us knew how. Then Dad whispered something. Something that hurt even more than the original insult. I was proud of you every single day. I broke. Completely. All the walls I built over 20 years collapsed at once. I hugged him. And for the first time since I was 18, my father hugged me back. Neither of us let go. Weeks later, we began rebuilding our relationship. Slowly. Awkwardly. Honestly. There was no magic fix. No overnight healing. But there was truth. And truth is where healing begins. 6 months later, Dad and I stood together at the opening ceremony of the Scholarship Foundation. Students. Families. Teachers. Everyone gathered to celebrate. Dad looked healthier than I had seen in years. Older. Still fragile. But peaceful. As he stood at the podium, he looked directly at me. Then he smiled. My son taught me something. The room grew quiet. He continued. Never use fear as a substitute for love. Not a single person moved. Then he added. The people we love should never have to earn our belief in them. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. Today, whenever someone asks me about success, I don't talk about my business. I don't talk about money. I don't talk about achievements. I tell them this. The greatest success of my life wasn't proving my father wrong. It was finally understanding him. Because sometimes the deepest wounds in a family are not created by hate. They're created by love expressed in the wrong way. And sometimes forgiveness begins the moment we learn the truth hidden behind the pain.